Welcome everyone to today's NASCIO webinar, Building North Dakota's Contribution to the Cyber Moonshot. This is Eric Sweden with NASCIO, and we are very glad to have you here participating in this webinar. This webinar is part of our cyber series. These webinars are recorded and available for playback from our website, and we encourage you to stay tuned to NASCIO for more webinars in this and other series at NASCIO. Today, we're exploring the cybersecurity program in the state of North Dakota and how they are preparing every student for the 21st century with cyber training. Our speaker today is North Dakota Chief Information Officer, Shawn Riley. Shawn has served in IT leadership positions for the past 22 years, developing strategies for transforming IT organizations while lowering costs and increasing revenues through effective use of technology. Shawn worked for the Mayo Clinic in numerous IT leadership roles from 2004 through 2017, and those roles included regional positions as Chief Information Officer, Chief Technology Officer, and Information Management Officer. Shawn assumed the role of Chief Information Officer for the state of North Dakota in April of 2017. Earlier in his career, he consulted at IBM and other Fortune 500 companies nationally and internationally on network, system security, compliance, training, e-health, and e-business. Shawn, thank you so much for coming and presenting to us today. At this point, I'll turn it over to you.
All right, Eric. Well, thank you very much. So everyone hear me all right, hopefully? All right. So thank you very much for your time here this afternoon. And what we'll be talking through is really what North Dakota is trying to do to really change our approach to cyber and cyber education. So with that, I'll just move through my slides. And first, I want to thank all the folks who are on the line today. And I really have to extend a thank you out to Governor Burgum and the governor's office here in North Dakota, as well as the IT structure and all of the organizations that have come together. We actually just put together our team list on this, and we have over 100 primaries on our team list. So we have a huge team that's working through this, more than 40 different organizations around the state and from around the country who are all coming together on this project. I want to just extend a thank you out to all those folks. So first of all, for those that have not visited North Dakota yet, just a couple of those brag stats. Every state has them, and we have, of course, lots of them ourselves. But what I want to draw your attention to is a mission statement that we have with the state of North Dakota, and that's empower people, improve lives, and inspire success. What we are working to do is really change how government has been perceived at a state level within the state in the past, and really move us forward to a much more 21st century government. And as we've been thinking about the services we provide and the systems that we manage on a day-to-day basis, we asked ourselves three questions, and I'll just put those out there for you. So the first one is, what skills does a 21st century workforce need? So it's 2018. We've got kids who are graduating this year who were born in the 21st century. And every kid who graduates after that is going to be a 21st century kid. And we think about the skills they need going forward. What do they need to be able to be successful tomorrow and for the technologies that are coming? The second question, what is the biggest threat and what are some of the largest threats overall to our state, our nation, and our world's economy? What are those impactors to our economy? What are those threats out there? And then the third question we asked, and this one gets a little more narrow in its focus, but how would the world be different if every executive, regardless of their industry, understood the value and the risks of cybersecurity? So with that then, we step back And we came up with our answers to those questions. And you, as your organizations, may have different answers to it, but the answers that we came up with made us think differently. And as we think about the 21st century workforce, as we think about how we need to transform education as education is moving to a completely new method of deployment, as we think about that brag stat there, #1 in entrepreneurship, #1 best environment for startups, #1 growth performer state, what are the threats to that environment? What is the threat to that economy? And then as we thought about globally those threats, what did that bring us to? It brought us to that more individualized, narrower question about every person in every industry and what is their knowledge and skill set. So from there, we launched a new initiative, and that new initiative is codenamed K20W. That is kindergarten through PhD plus workforce. Our vision here is every student, every school, cyber educated, kindergarten through PhD. We have stated that it is absolutely essential for the workforce of today and the workforce of tomorrow to understand cyber, to understand its impacts, and to understand really what those impacts are from a business standpoint as these kids enter the workforce. As they become college ready and choice ready, what are they going to do going into the future? So with that, our initiative is to educate every student, every school across the state, kindergarten through PhD in cyber. So the question that people will ask, right, why North Dakota? So we have a small population. We are one of the smallest populations. Now, North Dakota is under 1 million people here. We're just shy of 800,000 people actually, but we're about 70,000 square miles. So if you think of it that way, that makes us a pretty decent sized city with really, really big roads. And that's kind of what you see for North Dakota. Well, why would we want to be a national leader in cyber? So I've talked to a couple of those already, but the citizens, plain simple, protecting the privacy and security of our citizens' data is absolutely essential to trust. And every citizen within the state has to give us data. We force people to give us data as part of living as part of our state. It should be their right to keep that data private and secure without question. So right off the top, citizens, we have to do this for them. Secondly, as we think about this, well, technology is the opportunity. As you saw there, #1 in entrepreneurial environment. So what are we seeing? We're seeing hundreds of new companies spring up all across the state, all technology companies, evolving in precision agriculture for UAS and UAV, all of these different things. What is expanding today? What's changing the world? Technology. Add on to it that technology is changing every job, every industry, every organization, and every government. It doesn't matter whether you're going to be a farmer or a lawyer or a doctor or a welder or an IT security analyst. Every one of those jobs going forward is hugely technical. There's a ton of technology behind that, and computers are dead center in that space. Add on to that the state of North Dakota is thinking about smart cities and marching towards a smart state. And we have been talking about this overall possibility of 1 billion sensors just in North Dakota within our oil and gas environment, within our water environment, within our air environment. We're the second largest energy producing state in the country. There's a huge, huge demand for sensors in that environment to be able to manage our environment. What does that all give us then? It really sets the stage why North Dakota needs to move into cybersecurity. Governor Burgum talks here, the magic of software is driving a digital transformation. He's absolutely right. We are changing the world as we speak every single day. And as we watch technology, if you back up 15 years and you think in your mind, what did the world look like 15 years ago to what it looks like now? Imagine that change being even vastly more 15 years from now. So as we think going forward, how many semis are going to be autonomous semis 15 years from now? How many autonomous air vehicles are we going to see? All of the ways in which the world is changing. When you think of your city, how is a city built today? A city is built around the roads. The roads are built around the car. The car is built around the people. What happens when you take the people out of that environment? How does that world change? Where are hotels put today? What happens to your drive-through food and eateries, right? Does Pizza Hut need to have a drive-through anymore, or do they drive to you? And do they need to open a store anymore when they can have the bakery in the back of the truck and the truck drives to you and lets you pull your pizza right out of the back? All of those kind of things are changing the world and how we're going to be looking at the world in the future. So as we think about this, cybersecurity is absolutely essential to our collective future. So here in North Dakota, we're attempting to rise to that challenge by creating a statewide approach to cybersecurity. We're working on this at a strategic level, an operational level, and a workforce level. I can talk to the strategic, I can talk to operations, but what we're speaking here, what this presentation about, is primarily around education. So then the question comes, how are we getting there? So how do you shift an entire state to a new position? So first, we build our cyber mission control. And what is that cyber mission control? Well, what we have done is we have pulled together the vision folks around the state, and as we've pulled them together, we have gotten support directly from the top. So the gentleman there on the left is Governor Doug Burgum. To his right is our Superintendent of Public Instruction, and if you put that in most states, call that the Department of Education. And then that fuzzy fellow on the right side, all the way over there, that's me. I'm representing the North Dakota Information Technology Shared Services. So we have also brought in our university system. We're also bringing in our workforce organizations. But the governor and the head of our Department of Education and the chancellor of our university system have all stood together and said, this must happen. So we started at that mission point. From there, it came to the vision. What really truly is the vision? We started, honestly, with a conversation with myself and the head of our Department of Education here, having a conversation about getting more females and women into cyber and into technology. And this actually started with a program conversation about how do we get more involvement there and how do we move more people in that sense. And we had a couple of test kids, one of which was my daughter, who is very, very honest with me, and I could count on telling me how she thought of things. And as we went through a couple of our conversations, what we found is in reality, we need to be comprehensive. Everyone across the state needs to have a cyber education. Now, that does not mean that the entire workforce is going to become cybersecurity analysts. What that means is we want the workforce to understand basic cyber hygiene. We want the entire workforce to understand phishing emails, password security. We want the entire workforce to understand as they become adults and as they go out and become executives to know the risks, the challenges, and the value of making sure that you have a strong security posture. What happens to your organization when you don't? What do you need to be able to do across the board to make sure that you do, and how do you enable that? So that is really where our vision comes in. So the hard part, the really fun part, is working across the silos. So our organizations, we have the governor's office, Department of Public Instruction, University, as I said. Add on to that the National Guard, Department of Commerce, Department of Transportation, the Department of Labor, the Departments of Job Service, all government entities in that sense, as well as K-12 organizations, Center for Technology Education, the Center for Distance Education, our regional education associations. all of those organizations end up being part of this conversation. And the person who is running this team, Rosie Kloberdan's one of the leaders that we have within our IT organization. I commend her for, if nothing else, just being able to get all 40 organizations in the same room, especially when you're talking about lots and lots of state identities, and then add in Palo Alto Networks, Microsoft, NYSERC, the U.S. Army, U.S. Marines, etc. All of these organizations coming together. I commend her just for being able to get us all in the same room at the same time, much less for then also being able to get decisions and getting us moving forward. So as you can imagine, all of these organizations have a different need, and all of them approach things with good intentions, but intentions that are not necessarily aligned with each other. So as we've had to work through this, we had to work through an aspect of the vision. What truly is the vision? The slide that I had before. And from there, what supports that vision? What are all the organization's aspects in this? And amazingly, as we've worked through these initiatives, what we found really over and over again is that we may not all agree on how to get things done, but we all really agree that this should be done. So we've broken our teams into smaller work groups to work on legislation. We have other work groups to work on curricula. We have a group of education delivery individuals talking about the teach-to-teacher programs, all of those different components. The team then also comes back together again on a fairly frequent basis, I believe monthly now. And as they come together again, they start talking through what is the next hurdle that we need to go over. We've used, I would say, somewhat of an agile methodology for the project to be able to deliver results and then come back and move again. Now, this is a bit of a hybrid of what I would call agile and what is the more modern CI, continuous improvement model. But we've used those as part of the project to really be able to deliver new work at a very short amount of time. And what that has allowed and what that has encouraged is for everyone to keep staying with this. We didn't want to go a whole year without having results. We wanted to go at very, very short intervals. We can see results, we can see where we're going and moving forward. So what that's led to then is that's led to different schools who have put their hands up and said, we want to be part of the pilot. We have different organizations who are helping to co-manage the curricula and the teachers' educations. And those organizations then are partnering down the line to be able to get those small, quick wins that we turn around and say to the entire group, yes, we're winning, let's keep on going. So as part of that overall initiative, we also have to have integrated standards. And with that integrated standards, what we're talking here is we want to be computer and cyber science integrated. Building that 21st century workforce. Purely teaching cyber on its own individually has value, but not the value you need and you want. And we've seen this within schools. We've got a lot of schools across the state that for many years have had a cyber aspect education, but that cyber aspect education has been completely individual by itself without any integration into other subject matters. And frankly, as we talked to kids and we talked to teachers, they all looked at us and went, yeah, we're trying to do the right thing, but it doesn't work as well as it could. So I'll give you the example. The two girls that you see here on the screen, these two girls were second graders. They're now third graders as of about 7 days ago. But these two were second graders in this last spring. And they were in an elementary school that is just on the north side here in Bismarck. I went to visit that school, and as I came in through the front door, the little girl on the left, you see the one with the please stop sign, the little girl on the left, she came running down the hall, and she turned sideways, and she throws her hands up in the air, and she goes, stop, don't move. Of course, this little girl is about 10 inches across, and she's about hip high to me. So she scared me and I stopped dead cold. But here she is looking at me, and on the floor comes rolling around the corner the little robot on the left. And that little Ozobot there came zipping down the hall, stopped in the middle of the hall, turned right, drove right up to me. The head on it spun upwards, and it looked at me and said, "Please take your message." And I bent down and I took that little message out of the Lego box that they had built for it. And I open up that Lego box, and as I opened up that letter and I look at it, and here's a welcome letter from the entire class. It turns out this girl, along with her compatriot there, are building code. They are coding. They are learning to build languages. They have multiple different robots. And in fact, the entire class of about 25 kids all have their own robots. They're all learning languages. They're all learning how to develop software. And they were running through programs and projects. And started some of those programs and projects was how to get the individual robot to do different things, but also how can they take out tasks that they do on a daily basis. So this pair of girls, along with another pair of girls and a pair of boys, the three of them, or the six of them, the three pairs, I should say, all got together and decided, hey, let's take our robots and let's put them in tandem. So they lined them all up. They put basically a little sleigh behind it, and the sleigh was made out of a pizza box. And one of the boys decided to explain this to me. He said, well, you know, it's a lot of work to walk down to the library. So we've programmed our robots to work together to pull this pizza box, to drive down to the library, which is about 30 meters down from their classroom, drive into the library, ask the teacher, the librarian there, for a book. She places the book in the pizza box, and then the robots drive back into their room. As I sit there with those kids, I said, these kids are learning how things are going to work in an environment where you and I don't even know exist yet, right? They're going to be developing systems we don't even know exist yet. How are we going to help them? Not only in the moment, right now, how do we protect that room full of robots today, right now, from an attacker who's coming in trying to ransomware a school, but how do we give these kids the tools to be able to go forth into their next year and the years after that, thinking about defending those systems, making sure that they are in a place where they can think about cybersecurity as part of all of these other awesome things that they're building. So actually, the girl on the left, I asked her, I said, so Joey over here, what if he wants to change what your robot does? What if he wants it to do something different than you want to do it? When she took her tablet, she held it really tight against her chest, and she goes, no, he can't. And I'm looking at her and I go, good, you got physical security down. That's awesome. But from a code standpoint, they really hadn't worked through that. And that's part of what we want to make sure that we do with this integrated standard. Now, as we think about this with computer and cyber sciences together, we can also do this with mathematics. We can also do this with traditional sciences. We can also do this with English. And that is part of what we're working together to be able to build an integrated standard across multiple platforms of education. Now, educating the students is one thing. You also have to teach the teachers. So cyber education for the educators across the state. Now, in our case, we have already started some of these different aspects. We have teachers within our EduTech organization and our Center for Distance Education teams that have gone out to become NYSERC certified. We have other aspects of NIST and SANS type of knowledge sets that are also being integrated with them. And those teachers are going through kind of a T3 program right now, a Teach the Teachers program. And as they're going through that program, our critical mass here over the next roughly 2 years will to be able to get 700 teachers through that Teach the Teachers environment. And ultimately what we want to be able to do is we want to be able to create standards that enables teachers, and we want to be able to create standards that allows teachers in every single district, in every single school, to be able to get this courseware across to their students. And the Teach the Teachers program is, of course, complicated for lots of reasons. So when you think about cybersecurity, how quickly is it out of date? how fast does that information go from being absolutely correct to so-so and kind of stale? And the reality is that you can look at something and have a 6-month term of window and start to see a stale nature to that information. What we're rounding to is roughly 2 years. So we're looking for a comprehensive long-term education program that has a continuous improvement model as part of the Teach the Teachers program. Now, the K-20 team is working through that. What does that look like? How will that work? Frankly, all of that's very, very early stages. Now, we know where we need to go. We know where we want to go. We're testing things out. And what has really been excellent for this team is we're using a fast failure model. Go out, try something. If it succeeds, awesome. Try something again. If it fails, cool. Learn from it. Try something again. And the reality is those fast failure models can really iterate very quickly. So in under a year, we've been able to go from scratching my head saying, hey, what can we do here, to having 40 organizations across the state together with an overall vision, with draft legislation in hand, with teachers being taught, with students going through pilots all over the state. So we've been able to do this in a very quick amount of time in comparison to what you would typically expect. So it's a fast-moving, crushing forward as we've gone through this fast failure structure. It's been very good keeping people involved and keeping people moving so that they frankly just don't get distracted with other things or don't sit around thinking that we're boring because we haven't got anything done yet. So the other aspect of moving through this is we really have to design for the students. Now, this young girl here was also part of one of the classes that I went out and visited, and she's got her little Blinky bot there, and her Blinky bot is teaching her to learn software code, and what it teaches her is instructions. Now, if you're the regular programmer in today's IT world who's been doing this for 15 or 20 years, right, what do you typically start a kid on? And when I've been part of Coder Dojo and part of the coder events that I've done in my former world, as we talked about that, you always had the IT people coming in and say, oh, let's teach them HTML. Let's teach them Python. Let's teach them, JavaScript, right? Those are easy. And then we'll go into something cool. And the problem ends up being is that most of those languages are not good for introduction at younger ages. In the cases that we've looked at, 9th grade, 10th grade, senior, up through a senior in high school tends to be perfectly good for a straight up language. But in the younger ages, you don't want to have a straight out language right away. So what is this girl learning? And in her class, she's learning that if she puts sets of colors together, and you can see some of that in her drawing there, that as she puts those sets of colors together, it makes the robot do different things. So this is instructional learning that goes through a process that they can understand. I'm programming this robot using those little magic markers over on the left. And she's got multiple colors. And I unfortunately am colorblind, so I can't tell you all of those. But what you can see when you look at the photo is her robot will follow the black line. And when it reaches a pattern, it will take an action. It could spin left, it could spin right, it could go in reverse, it may turn on lights on the robot, et cetera, et cetera. But she's learned to be able to make those controls, and she's having fun doing it. Now, when you take that and then you add it into some of the other programs that are going on, move it over to the BoboBots, move it over to coding.org, et cetera, there's lots of opportunities for her then to escalate that knowledge as she is then been designed for. So kindergarten through PhD, the kindergartner needs to learn simply that technology exists and passwords exist and a few other things. That third grader needs to learn something different. The sixth grader needs to learn something different, and on through that program. And when you get to PhD, hopefully they can code in 15 different languages and give us an AI and a ML type of outcome. All that stuff's there. But those are the possibilities here around designing for students. The other component we have to take into consideration is operational security. So as I said, we have three large arms here. We have strategic security within North Dakota, we have operational security, and we have workforce. The vast majority of these slides are all built around workforce. How do we help kids design and learn and understand in the 21st century in a continuous learning environment where you've got lifelong learners? How do we help get them there? This one slide here is dedicated to operational security, defending schools on a day-to-day basis. So as we all know, schools have become a new target. The bad actors out there, whether it be organized crime or the nation states and other things, are going directly after schools on a day-to-day basis, and for all sorts of reasons. We've all seen in the news where you've got a kindergartner, first grader, second grader who's having identity theft component problems because the bad guys have been able to get that data harvested out of a school. We've seen schools across the country that have been attacked by ransomware and malware and those type of things. One of the schools that's up here in our region was unfortunately locked completely down through ransomware. And when the ransomers couldn't get anything out of the school, they had all the data about the students and the parents. So they started calling parents and students and saying, you give us our money or you're not going to college. Some really nasty stuff that happens out there. Now, those type of things are not acceptable. And we have taken an approach here, unfortunately, in the past where we were all separate entities. And if you think of the different branches of government, I know we were all taught in fourth grade that there were three branches. I like to think of there's really seven, K-12 and universities being two of those seven. But in the K-12 and in university environments, we are giving the opportunity to think very differently about cybersecurity. So we have one of the strongest backbones for our WAN across the state. Within all of our schools, we have a very deep data capacity to all of these schools across the country, across the state. But we have 1 gig and 10 gig today. We have by July of this upcoming year, 10 gig and 100 gig backbones available to every school district across the state. So what we are doing is we are extending our operational day-to-day defense capabilities out to other schools. Our intent is to be able to extend our desktop defense software and our endpoint overall defense software out to be able to get out to everyone. Now, there are some legislative aspects that we have to work through with that, but I will say that I've presented now to the heads of our education committees, head of our K-12 education committee, head of our interim technology committees, all of them after hearing the case and really seeing the threats that they deal with, all of them have said, yes, we need to find a way to do this. So from a legislative perspective, we've had a really resounding thumbs up so far. Once we get to actual budgets and actual legislation, we'll see what happens. We know that we're in challenge with lots of things. But in reality, the capability to defend schools on a day-to-day is something that we intend to do very differently, and we intend to be able to centralize a security operations team to be able to defend those schools across the board. So that is what our goal is, and that's what we're moving towards. Oops. There we go. So when we talk about outcomes, and I've talked to a lot of those already here, but when it comes to outcomes, we're trying to build the 21st century workforce. Again, it doesn't matter what job you have in the future. It will have some sort of technical component to it. When I look at farmers today, somebody who the general public doesn't think of as being very technologically advanced, when today we have a fully robotic dairy farm sitting in Lisbon, North Dakota that has been operating for a better part of 2 years now, fully robotic dairy farm, no humans involved, completely technology driven. The cows are milked, they're fed, they're managed completely by robotic technologies. that gives you an idea where the world's going. We also have robotic tractors sitting here in the state of North Dakota right now, planting farms, managing farms through robotic technology. So when you look at the future and you think of that 21st century workforce, I dare everybody to find me someone who isn't going to need technology. Last week, I stood in front of a room of over 500 people, and I just point blank, please, somebody yell out a job that won't need technology in the future. And 2 or 3 people put out a job, and everyone else in the room corrected them almost immediately and said, nope, that needs technology here, here, and here. So when we think about this, that is the outcome we're looking for. We have to think about what we're building for the future. So what's next? We aren't stopping here. So those of you who have seen me present before in some of my larger venues, you'll see I have these Mars slides all over the place. And that's partially because I like to poke the cyber moonshot conversation a little bit. And I said, it's awesome that we want to go to the moon, but the reality is we've already been to the moon. I want to go to Mars. Nobody's been to Mars. I want to go there. And what we're talking about now is the conversations above and beyond. So if we educate kids from kindergarten through PhD, then what? Well, in the state of North Dakota, we've got about 56 agencies within the executive branch, majority of which have some sort of aspect of workforce dollars. So re-education or getting back into the workforce programs. There's a ton of different programs that we have. All good initiatives that are trying to get things done to help people back into the workforce. Well, the problem we have today is we only have 1.8% unemployment on a practical level. We've got a 2-point-something% unemployment on a published level. We don't have a workforce to retrain right now. We need to attract more people to be able to manage those jobs. And that's one huge component about this is that we will have a cyber-educated workforce that attracts companies from all over the country. We've had numerous companies already giving us calls saying, what are you doing? Tell us about that. And some of those companies are already having conversations about what are they going to do moving to North Dakota because they want to be part of this mission. Now, on top of that as well is when you do have those times of re-education, we are refocusing how those workforce dollars are managed under 5 core pillars. And one of those core pillars is cyber and computer sciences and technologies. So again, more things we want to move forward with. And even if we even get out there further and we look at the future of where we want to go, the vision never stops. And I kind of poke the governor with this a little bit. For those of you that know Governor Burgum, he's a really big basketball fan. And I say, well, Governor Burgum, I would love to have tournaments on the cyber stage, red versus blue teams, constant tournaments between all the schools. And I said, well, and someday we're going to make it bigger than basketball. And I think that's where he drew the line. We can't be bigger than basketball. But other than that, everything else is fair game. So this is part of what's next and where we want to continue forward. So a little quote here. Far and away the best prize that life offers is a chance to work hard at work worth doing. And that quote actually comes from one of North Dakota's most famous citizens, and that was President Teddy Roosevelt. The reality is that we really have to think about the future differently. We're hearing all the doomsday conversations out there. And if you go read about what people are saying about higher ed, you've got the Clayton Christensens of the world, the person who invented the concepts around disruptive innovation, who are predicting that 50% of all universities are going to be bankrupt and gone within the next 15 years because the way in which education is being disrupted. When you look at the world out there on how technology has changed everything we have done over the last 30 years, 15 years, and how it's going to change us even vastly that much more in the next 15 years, the world is speeding up in its rate of change, not slowing down. So how are we going to rise to that challenge? And that's part of what we put out there, is that we are here to work hard at work worth doing, and this is absolutely work worth doing. So with that, I'd like to thank all of you. We wanted to leave some time here at the end for questions. I think we've got about 15 minutes-ish left, and wanted to thank you all for listening. I see there's 56 attendees. I appreciate you guys jumping on. And from there, I think I hand the mouse back to Danielle.
Thank you very much, Shawn. This is a very interesting presentation, but more, I think, is the interesting future that you're creating in North Dakota. And we're going to have you back to give us some status reports on your progress.
No problem.
Well done. Shawn, I've got a few questions to start things off while Danielle and I watch for questions from our participants. Now, you've brought together a number of communities, and we had published a cyber disruption response planning guide some years ago that made the point that the only way we can be successful at cyber disruption response planning is to pull together all of these communities that include utilities, industry, education, National Guard, state police, fusion centers, a lot of different communities coming together and beginning to collaborate now, so that during any event, we've already got the relationships established. So as I'm looking at the work you're doing, it appears there's collateral or parallel benefit, including the fact that you've got people that are at the table together, and maybe that same venue can be used to be pursuing some of these more statewide and regional-wise kinds of collaboratives and initiatives. So have you thought about, or are you using that same coming together to prepare for other things besides cyber awareness, cyber training, but actually begin to develop like a statewide or regional-wide cyber disruption response planning strategy?
Yeah, so Eric, that's a great question. So we absolutely are, and as I mentioned during the presentation, so we have three arms to our cybersecurity initiatives within the state. One is strategic, one is operational, and one is workforce. And today's conversations have been all around workforce. Now, the response model that you're talking to has been part of both our strategic plan and our operational initiatives. And now, what we have done is we have brought together our state local intelligence center along with the fusion center environment. We have partnered directly with the National Guard, used the National Guard as kind of the tip of the spear, if you will. And we have asked Governor Burgum to take part in these conversations. And Governor Burgum has been instrumental in helping us reach out to industry at a sector component. So what we have done is today, as of today, we have run through three different sectors. The first being energy, the second being healthcare, the third being finance. And those three sectors have all come together. So we've asked everyone involved in each of those three areas to come together in individual groups. So we brought all of energy together first, sat everyone down in the same room, and said, here's our situation. Can any of us defend ourselves individually? Kind of, right? And what is the capability for all of us to defend each other together? So there's been a great vision put behind this as well. And what we are starting with is threat intelligence. This kind of helps companies to get their feet wet. It helps them get comfortable with each other and comfortable with this government model. But threat intelligence is phase one. Ultimately, what we want to be able to get to is what we're calling a model of a cyber regular, a cyber guard, and cyber militia. So the cyber regulars, that is mostly comprised of teams that are with under my entities and with the entities directly partnered to me within the state. The Cyber Guard is the straight up National Guard, Cyber Defense Force. And then the Cyber Militia is made up of all of these different organizations who have raised their hand and said, yes, we want to be part of these sectors. And what it would allow us to do is, by governor's decree, call out the National Guard, quote unquote, type of thing, but for cyber events, and be able to bring in Cyber Militia as part of our teams. Now, that is, of course, as I said, that is phase 2. That is what we're working towards. We are changing legislation to be able to go that way. We have new things that will be coming forward in January that will also be able to help us with that. But that is the direction that we're looking to go. And we have been meeting now with the first 3 sectors here for, just over a year that we started meeting with the 3 sectors, getting those together. And we're then moving on to the next sector down the line.
Mm-hmm. Very good. Now, as you look at the future, as you move into the future, you're providing training to all of these various tiers within education: grade school, high school, undergrad, graduate, workforce. So you're going to reach a steady state where, in fact, you've got people in the workforce who have been exposed to this training and awareness and ecosystem from the time they were in elementary school. So is the program anticipating, as these people move through their years of training and then into workforce, the kinds of things you're going to address? You did talk about the language, what languages, the various tiering of complexity. You'll have that properly organized, but the level of awareness, topics, etc., related to cybersecurity, you anticipating what that might look like by the time you're to that steady state where now your beginners in elementary school are now actually in the workforce, and what will the training be like by the time they reach that point? Because they will have had 20 years of training by the time they get to the workforce.
Right. So as we think of it, right, we're talking about kids that are going to be entering kindergarten in the next 2 years, and they'll be coming out of high school somewhere in the neighborhood of 2036, 2038, right? Mm-hmm. And when you're looking at that kind of future aspect, I think it's a whole lot easier to predict 30 years out than it is 2 years from now. Yeah. And when you go out into those futures, you can say the reality is that everything will be interconnected. Sensors everywhere, IP addresses everywhere, everybody connected and integrated to technical aspects every single day on a constant basis, to the point in which it's so common they rarely notice that they're connected to it. And as we get there, as we move that direction, how does education have to change? So education will have to evolve as it goes, but from a subject matter component, we're going to have to refresh it on a constant basis. So we're going to have to refresh what is the new possibility, what are those new components. But when you get in fundamentally, it's like math, right? Yes, there's all these cool calculus types of math out there that you can play with, but you start with addition, you start with subtraction. We will still be starting with cyber hygiene. We'll be starting with those levels and working through that process going through.
At this point, have you gone far enough to get a reaction or any kind of response from these various tiers, particularly undergrad, graduate school, and workforce? Have you gotten any response from the people that are actually in the program, getting and receiving the training? Have they given you any kinds of likes, dislikes, any kind of reaction?
So we don't have any kids that have gone through, or students, I should say. We don't have any students that have gone through a full year yet. Given this entire initiative is just a year old, actually, about 2 weeks ago. So this entire initiative is about a year old. We have pilot groups that are going to be kicking off here this season, school season, but they're in different pieces and parts. This will take a couple of years to be able to get the curriculums out there. It'll take a couple of years to get to the point of having, the critical mass of educators. But the reality is, people look at me and go, well, why do you want to do something that's not going to get done for 15 years? And I go, well, because we don't start it now, it's never going to get done ever. We want to kick those things off today and start them marching forward.
Right, and that is going to take some time, but you will get there. Have you collaborated at all with other states or municipalities on similar kinds of programs?
So right now, our collaborations out of state have mostly been private companies. So we've got the private sector very, very interested in this. Palo Alto Networks has been a very key player for us. Microsoft, the Teals environment, Google has been part of this as part of the coding programs, NYSERC, etc. But as far as other governments, I've had several of them call me and say, can we talk over the possibilities? And I'm actually having some conversations with some large school districts across the country and just talking about what our intent is and what we're trying to do. But right now, I think in a more global basis that people want to see if it's going to work the way we intend it to work, and then we'll want to go from there.
So you're the test. You're the laboratory test case for a lot of jurisdictions.
Yeah, we have become more comfortable than previously, should I say, with being the bleeding edge. So Governor Burgum is an outstanding advocate for technology and how the world needs to move forward. And his expectations are different than what previous governors have been, not right or wrong, just other. His expectations are is that we absolutely step on the bleeding edge and we absolutely try things that no one else has done.
Yeah. Now you brought up ransomware. That's the thing that we're all very, very concerned about. And so many institutions, individuals have fallen victim to this. As part of the strategy, have you looked at how we can discourage that kind of crime? Is there some way to address that particular crime, to shut it down, reduce it, make it extremely painful for people to pursue that crime? Any work there?
So ransomware from the education standpoint has basically been it's more of a check mark of, hey, we got to talk about ransomware, what it is. From an operational standpoint, though, there are technologies that have evolved. Palo Alto, as I mentioned, Cisco, Tanium, several other companies that are evolving their technology specifically for purposes around ransomware. And if you think of the capability to be able to see traffic types outside the norm. And what this comes down to is this is part of your machine learning aspects that plugs into your artificial intelligence. And how do you see machines doing things that they never are expected to do so that you can get ahead of those events? And that's from an operational standpoint. I think in reality, you go out 5 years, ransomware is just going to be another one of those annoying things that really doesn't cause a ton of trouble anymore. But that's part of just managing your security operations.
Yeah, as with many other kinds of cyber events, we are continuing to evolve, and of course, the attacker is evolving as well.
Yeah, they have a tendency to be able to be more nimble than we can, right? Because we have rules and they don't. But the reality is that's why we have to get ahead of them in these spaces, and we have to be comfortable in stepping outside of the box.
Right. Now, you've talked about the evolving circumstance for educational institutions, and what potentially could happen in 15 years. Is part of that related to industry itself actually taking over education? So in other words, we've had in my past life working in industry, we had a vision toward creating our own university. So we would be recruiting at the high school level, bringing people in to our company and teaching them all the skills they would need to move into various areas, disciplines that we would need, whether it's the business side, marketing, manufacturing, research and development. But that would be a huge transition for industry. But we would have people specifically trained in our methodologies and technologies and start them young. Is that the kind of thing that you're talking about? Is universities eventually becoming obsolete, or what are you speaking about actually?
So the disruption comes in multiple ways, right? So you have an aspect of kind of what you were talking about. So you've got employers out there who get a graduate fresh out of college and then still have to spend 1 to 2 years training that fresh graduate on how to operate within their organization. And that alone has caused industry to think differently about how they approach education. So you're seeing a rise of certifications. You're seeing a rise of industry-driven education. You're seeing a rise of private-public partnerships where the private side is weighing much, much heavier on curricula than they used to. That's one aspect. The other aspect of really what is disrupting education in general comes down to the ubiquitous aspect of information. We can get information everywhere now. Why do I need to get a bachelor's degree to be able to go into cyber education, and in that bachelor's degree spend a third of my time doing things that have nothing to do with the cyber education? Then I can go on YouTube and watch that history class. Or I can go on Great Courses Plus and I can pay $180 for as many classes as I want for a year. Those type of things are disrupting education immensely today. And this is where you have like the University of the People, if you've seen that, you're able to go get an accredited master's degree for $0 right now. And that's because they're leveraging that type of technology. How does a traditional school compete with that? Those are the kind of things that if you go and read the Clayton Christensen's and others, the education disruption is immense and happening before our eyes, and the vast majority of people just don't realize.
Yeah, that's right. Big change. Well, Shawn, we want to thank you very much for being here today and presenting to us. This is Shawn's contact information, and if you have any questions for him, you can email him or call him. Likewise, contact me if you've got any questions, ideas for future webinars. And Danielle, if you'll move to the next slide, we'll show people how to stay in contact with NASCIO. Shawn, thank you very much. And to all the participants, thank you for joining us today. Stay tuned for more future webinars from NASCIO. Have a good afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you.